In today's video, I'm going to be doing a review of the Tokina 11-16 f2.8 lens. This is a great little lens. It's a inexpensive lens that I use for landscape type shots on my last trip. And we had some questions about it, so I thought I'd dig into it a little bit, show you some images, and compare it to my Nikon 16-35 that I've been using for years and I love. And we'll see what the advantages and disadvantages of this lens are. Stick around. So this Tokina lens is a great little lens. I used it on my last trip. I showed you some of the images. If you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link to it here. But I went on a vacation on a cruise and I took the M50 and I used some less expensive lenses on it. This Tokina lens has the build quality and feel of a professional lens. It feels solid. It's a very good looking lens. It fits on the camera nice and snugly. I have no issues with it in any way that, in that respect. It takes a 77mm filter, which was great because I use filters all of the time with my photography. If you don't follow us on social media, well, you can, first of all, at Disney Image Makers, but you'll see we use motion in our photography quite often, and we do it during the day quite often also. And having filter threads on your lens really makes a big difference. I once had a Tokina 16-35 for my Nikon full-frame camera, and it had no filter thread. So right about here, you get a bulbous, you get the lens kind of bulbing out, almost like a fisheye. And I had to buy this crazy rig to put over it where I'd put these big filters on it. And it was so frustrating that I actually sold it, and I ended up buying this instead. This is a Nikon 16-35, but this has filter threads. And to me, this is one of the most important things a landscape lens can have. So I've been using this lens for years and years, and I'm going to show you some images from this lens, and then I'm going to compare them to the Tokina. So I'm going to jump into the computer here, and I'm going to start with this lens and how good the images you can get out of a really quality landscape lens is. And then I'm going to compare the images I took with the Tokina to them, and I'm going to zoom in on these images, and you're going to see for a $400 lens, I think I paid a little less than $400 for this, the images are really, really good. They're not as good as this. This is a $1,200 lens. But if you are looking to put this, if you have a crop sensor camera, this will work perfectly, natively. If you are shooting on the M50 or any Canon M mount lenses, this very easily connects with the adapter, and now I can put this on the M50, which is exactly what I did. And the adapter, there was no loss of quality, the focusing, everything worked perfectly. Though there's one little thing about this lens that's kind of neat. This is there's no autofocus switch or anything on this. It's got a push-pull focusing autofocus system. So when I pull it back, it's not in autofocus. When I push it up, it is in autofocus. So it's very easy to quickly go from autofocus to manual focus. So if you have a filter on the front, you're doing a long exposure, and you want to lock down your focus and then quickly, put it in manual focus, you click it in and you're good to go. You don't have to go into the camera settings, or there's no switches or dials. It's just a quick pull of the lens. So I've always liked that about Tokina lenses. So let's jump into the computer here, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the images that I've taken with these lenses over the years and things that I like about them and don't like about the Tokina in particular. One of the first images I want to show you is an actual Tokina shot that I took. This is in 2014 in August, and I had the Tokina 16-28 f2.8 lens. Now, if you don't think off-branded lenses can be sharp or as good as Nikon and Canon and Sony, this might be one of the sharpest images I've ever taken. This doesn't even look real to me. When you look here, I mean, this is absolutely amazing. I was probably standing 100 yards away from this, and this is how sharp this image is. So don't be off-put by third-party lenses. That lens is unbelievably sharp. I got fantastic images with that lens. I was perfectly happy with it. The reason I got rid of it was because of the filter thread. Now, I could have worked around that, but I've also taken some amazing images with the Nikon. So we're going to look at some of those now. Okay, so this is an image from my Nikon D750. Now you can see this is also super sharp. This is a long exposure, so they might see some movement here in the trees, but you can see the detail on this, on the tree of life here. Again, this is the Nikon 16 to 35, and you can see everything is super sharp. Again, I was standing quite a bit of ways for this one. I cropped it in so you guys could actually see how sharp it is. So here's another one. I shot this at night. This is a long exposure HDR. This is, I think, 3 or 4 images blended together. This is the Nikon. One thing about landscape lenses is they're going to distort your image a little bit. You might get some fall off in the corners, or you might get some crazy angles. Sometimes if you have a horizon line, which I'm going to show you, it may have a bend in it. You know, you'll see a bend in your horizon lines. These are all really easily correctable in Lightroom, so don't worry about those little imperfections. I will say that Tokina was a little more challenging for me because some of, even with correction, they still looked a little wonky sometimes. But it's a less expensive lens, so there's trade-offs. There's one in New York City. Buildings and actually the cruise ships are great to use as examples because you can really get in tight and see the details. And you can see all the bricks here. You know, the bridge is nice and sharp. It's a nice sharp shot. Here's another one from the same night. So you can see the buildings. This was across the river. So this is quite a distance. This might be maybe a half a mile distance across, and you could see the buildings are still very sharp. So this is what you want out of a landscape lens. And another thing with landscape lens, it also has a lot to do with your technique. You have to make sure that the camera does not move, that you're using a shutter release, that the tripod is stable. You really, your technique has to be really good, and the mirrorless cameras are great for that because there's no shutter to flap. So you're eliminating a little bit more of the movement that can happen by using a mirrorless camera. I shot these with a DSLR, but I used a exposure delay mode, which what that does is it actually flips up the mirror. Then the camera waits for 3 seconds before it actually opens the shutter and exposes the shot. So that's a great way to prevent any kind of camera shake also, and I've been using that for years and years. So that's something, if your camera has it, use it. Again, here's another shot from the Nikon with my D750. So you can see this is a sharp setup. I'm getting nice images out of it. Some more nighttime images. Okay, yeah, I know you're saying this is a Tokina, but I want you to get an idea of the level of sharpness that you can get from a long exposure. Okay, now I also want to show you on a mirrorless camera. So on the Canon M50, I want to show you what a good lens looks like on that, because the Tokina is made for these types of cameras. They're not made for full-frame DSLRs. This lens is made for APS-C size sensors. And I wanted to show you what a really nice L lens on the M50 gives you. So when I was in Lancaster in December, I took a couple of images of a building, and I showed them to you in a previous video, but I wanted to zoom in a little tighter and show you how the camera can handle a really good lens. It'll give you a sharp image. So this image here is just of my hotel. It's a 3-shot exposure, but if you zoom in tight, you can actually read the wall here. This is inside the lobby of the hotel on the wall, and it's very defined. So this is a super sharp lens. Now this is Eric's 24 to 70. When you move around this image, you'll see it takes a nice sharp image, and this is on the M50. Here's one more from that trip. This was a moving train that was going by. I mean, very sharp. These nice folks enjoying the holiday train ride. Okay, so you get the idea. A good lens is going to give you a really sharp image. And these are professional level Nikon and Canon lenses on full frame and a crop sensor camera. They're giving great results. Lenses make a difference. So how does a lens that's a quarter of the price compare? So now let's look at some of the Tokina images that I took on my trip. First one is a landscape image I took at 5:30 in the morning. I got up and I went out to shoot the sunrise. So if we zoom in tight on this one, Now I shot this at f/22, so you can see this little thing over here, I'm not sure what it is, some sort of little beacon or a light, is not tack sharp. The rocks over here are pretty sharp, but there is a little bit of softness in here that I probably wouldn't have gotten had I used my DSLR with the Nikon lens. Now that's not to say this is a bad lens. You know, this is a cool image. I love it. You know, that's being very nitpicky. So here's another image. Now, images of the ships and things like that, I took a lot of them with the Tokina because they're wide, obviously. This is a great way to see if the image is sharp, because the ship was not close to me and it was broad daylight, and so we're really going to get an idea of how the lens is sharp. So I'm going to zoom in here and let's take a look at the ship across the way. Now this is a nice sharp shot. So when you look at this, everything is nice and sharp. Now, if I took this same image with my Nikon, I don't think I would have gotten a sharper image than this. So maybe there was something that I did in this first image that didn't let me get this as sharp as I could have. And that's what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's not the gear, sometimes it's the photographer. Now that morning I noticed most of my images were not tack sharp. It's the same lens and camera combo as the ship image. So what's the difference? One was a long exposure, one was not. One I just shot quickly, it was at a higher, you know, shutter speed. So maybe with the long exposures, maybe there was some movement. I'm not really sure, but that's what I'm talking about. There could be little things in my technique. This is a mirrorless camera, so I'm not used to using it with long exposures. I think I did everything correctly. I used the delay on the exposure, so I wasn't touching the camera, but you never know. It could have been a mistake I made. Now, if you look at this image of the ship, you'll notice it's very wide, and I straightened out the horizon and corrected it as much as I could, but it definitely does have a wide-angle look to it. There's something about it that you can tell it was taken with a wide angle. It was a little bit distorted looking, and that's something I noticed with this lens a little bit with some of my images. Here's another one as we were pulling out of port. Now this one doesn't look as distorted for some reason. It's a nice sharp image of the ship as we were leaving. 1/200th of a second, so fast enough shutter speed. The ship was moving slowly. And here's another one of another ship as we were leaving port. Again, very sharp. For $400, I was not disappointed with the images I was getting out of this Tokina. Now this one, if you look around here, it looks a little bit soft to me, but not enough, you know, it's not terrible. Here's the distortion that I was talking about. So if you look here on the horizon line, you can see the bend. It dips down in the corners. You're going to get this a lot of times with wide-angle lenses, and it's easily correctable. In the next image here, I'll show you the corrected image, and there it is. So it's not a big deal, and it's something that you can easily fix in your editing software. Here's another image I got up in the morning to take. Again, nice and sharp on the ship here. If you zoom in tight, you can see the detail here. Really sharp. Now this guy was moving, this guy was standing still, that's why he's blurry. But again, you could tell that it's a little bit distorted. The lines aren't straight. So I corrected it for the horizon, but the ship was still a little out of whack. Another ship image, nice and sharp. Here's two ships in port. Again, very sharp images. So this Tokina is a really nice lens. It focused quickly, solidly built. This is an image I took when we were in port of one of the stops. This is shot at f4, and you can see a lot of the detail. You can see the people in the water. You can see what's going on all around. So at f4, I think I was focusing on these trees here in front. So this is going to start to get a little blurry as you fall off a little bit. But it's a sharp shot. Again, at f4 you can get some nice soft out of focus areas. Here's an HDR I shot in St. Thomas. Again, nice and sharp. You can see the sun stars here, the little, you know, stars that you get off the lights. So this is a nice sharp image. This is in HDR, so this is a few exposures blended. That's why some of the boats look a little blurry, because they are actually moving in the water. But our ship that we were on, where my tripod was, is nice and sharp. There's no movement here, and that's why this is all in focus, really sharp. This one I just kind of leaned over the side of the ship, And I don't mind the distortion here, but there was a lot of it. I had to correct for this a little bit. This is an image of my wife that I wanted to show you. If you look here, this is the corrected image, and this was an image I had trouble with. When you shoot people with a wide-angle lens, it gives you a kind of an odd, squished feeling to the image. Here is the original. So I don't like the look of this. I tried to correct it a little bit, but it almost looks like she's leaning and everything's a little out of sorts. So if you're going to shoot people with a wide-angle lens, just be prepared for some squished faces, the noses get a little flattened, you get some odd kind of angles. It's not the best for people. I would stick to using this lens for landscapes. If you're going to use it for groups of people, make sure it's wide and you're not up too close, because the people on the end are going to get they're going to be distorted more than the people in the middle. And that's one of the things that you have to deal with any wide angle lens. But this one, I noticed it more than I did with my Nikon and Eric's 24-70 for sure, because it's not as wide. So it's a nice sharp lens. I like it. I definitely think it's worth the $400 that they charge for it. It's solidly built. It's a very heavy feeling lens. It feels like a professional lens. Tokina glass has always been, I found, very sharp. So this is a great lens if you have any crop body camera, because they make this lens for all different mounts. They make it for Canon, Nikon, I believe Sony. So don't be afraid of third-party lenses. In that first image I showed you, it was so sharp. My old Tokina that I used on my full frame, it's one of the sharpest lenses that I had. It was great. And I just wanted to be able to use filters on it, which I couldn't. This one you can. So the fact that it's small, it works well on, the crop sensor cameras, it's inexpensive, and it gives you a very good image. There's going to be a little bit distortion. That's something you're going to have to correct for. But all in all, I think it's a great lens and well worth having if you're shooting with a APS-C size camera or a mirrorless camera that you can use an adapter to put it on. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments. We love hearing from you guys. We're actually learning a lot from you guys, because sometimes you have information about these lenses and cameras that we don't, or maybe we didn't know. And it's been a great back and forth, so we appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel if you want more of these types of reviews and content, and we will see you in the next one.